Hi, thanks for joining me for Principles of Customer Service. It'll be presented by me, Steve Scully. I'm a tutor, trainer and assessor. Before we go on to the next slides, these courses that I've generated are here to help you with distance learning only for the course, and this one is for Principles of Customer Service. So when you use these resources, make sure you make a note of how long you've spent on each unit. Your tutor then can use this evidence as proof towards distance learning, because you don't want to waste any of your time that you're doing. When you learn, there's two different types of learning. There's distance learning and there's classroom-based learning. When you complete these courses, for instance, Principles of Customer Service, you have a guided learning hours. Now the guided learning hours for this course is 112 hours. It's usually split up 50-50 between classroom and distance learning, which is 56 for classroom, 56 for distance learning. Now distance learning is when you do stuff at home, such as your homework or your research. So just make sure you keep a note of everything that you're doing. The buzzword there is guided learning hours, so it's guided. So your training centre or your training provider will usually dictate what the difference is, the ratio 56 hours for classroom or 56 for distance learning. So you need to double check with them, but always make sure you keep a note of the amount of time that you're spending, because if you don't, you're going to be wasting your time, which you don't want to do. So before we get started on these online distance learning, we cover a bit about health and safety. Take regular breaks away from your computer screen. This course on here is usually around about an hour long, so take a little bit of time away, because you can start feeling a bit tired if you spend too much time in front of a computer screen, or can give you headaches or anything seriously. So just make sure that you take regular breaks. Maintain health e-safety rules when you're online as well, not just on this course but in general as well. It goes without saying. Don't open anything on an email that you're not expecting, or if it looks dodgy. If you get anything from like the HMRC or anywhere like that, if you're not sure, don't click on the link. Just phone them up from a dedicated phone number or email address, but don't use the link that you've got. Usually, majority of the time at the moment, they are dodgy. Do not have any liquids near your computer. Water and electricity never mix well, and I don't want to be responsible for any damage to your computer. If you do need to evacuate your building, please do so as quickly as you can. Your safety is my prime concern, as well as yourselves. British values. Now, you should have gone over some of this with your training provider, so we're going to just briefly go over some. Now the rule of law, democracy, individual liberty, mutual respect, and tolerance for those of different faiths and beliefs. So British values, starting with the rule of law. There's three main principles of law, and that is no one is above the law, no matter who they are. Law protects everybody, and innocent until proven guilty. These are our main three principles. We do live in a democratic society where everyone has the right to vote, as long as they're over the legal age of 18. And when we vote, we do this by secret ballot, and we vote for people who we want in office, such as our Prime Minister or our local councils and councillors. We also vote for things that are important to us as individuals as well. Moving on to individual liberty, is that everybody has the right to speak and view your opinions without fear of reprisal or intimidation from anyone else, as long as it's not deemed insightful or discriminate towards other people, individuals or groups. A good example is that you could go into the middle of your shopping centre or Hyde Park in London, stand on a box and voice your own opinions to what's important to you. And then we move on to mutual respect and tolerance of those for different faiths and beliefs. So in the UK, we do have a wealth of diverse people of every religious denomination and belief. And this has enhanced our culture, and this is what makes the UK one of the best countries to live in. Like liberty, everyone has the right and is entitled to live their lives the way they wish, to be free from persecution, as long as this does not infringe on others' individuals' liberties and the law. Another thing that we have to consider as well is safeguarding and prevent. So safeguarding is everyone has the right to live their lives free from harm, including people on training courses and online as well, is that you have the right to come into a training course and feel comfortable in receiving the training that you're getting, regardless of your age, your gender, your religion or your ethnicity. Same as in workplaces as well. It's important that all children and vulnerable adults can feel safe and protected. Safeguarding is also about creating a safe and welcoming environment where everyone is respected and valued and is run in a way that actively prevents harm, harassment, bullying, abuse and neglect. It's also about being ready to respond safely if there is a problem and making sure any concerns are reported to the appropriate person or safeguarding officer within your organisation or training provider. Prevent. Now, the aim of the prevent strategy is to reduce the threat to the UK from terrorism by stopping people becoming terrorists or supporting terrorism. There is an important role for further education institutions, including sixth form colleges and independent training providers, in helping prevent people being drawn into terrorism, which includes not just violent extremism, but also non-violent extremism, which can create an atmosphere conducive to terrorism and can popularise views which terrorists do exploit. If you have any concerns regarding or witnessing extremist views or radicalisation within your training centre, then you can and should report it to your tutor, centre manager or safeguarding officer. Or most training providers will have online websites that you can report anything anonymously as well. As part of safeguarding and prevent, see, think and act is also responsibility of both yourselves and the organisation that you're receiving your training from. So if you see any behaviours that are different to the normal, so you might see from the very first day someone will become in bubbly and full of excitement, and as the time goes on they might become withdrawn or their clothing or appearance might change. Doesn't always mean that they're being radicalised or anything untoward is going on, but it's good to observe it, and if you are worried, make sure it's reported to the appropriate person. Think, what may be contributing to this behaviour? As I mentioned, it's not always about whether or not if someone's been radicalised or harassment or bullying. They might find the course a bit tiresome or boring, but until you look into it, you won't know, or it's reported. If you're not confident enough to talk to the person, make sure you make the tutor, who should already notice things like this anyway, but make sure that they're aware of it. Act, tell your tutor, safeguarding officer, who will agree what needs to happen and make sure it does. So these are all relating to safeguarding and prevent. We all have a responsibility to keep everybody safe, including ourselves. Another thing that we have to be considerate of is the Equality Act. Now, these 9 protected characteristics that comes underneath the Equality Act, that's age, disability, gender reassignment, race, religion or belief, sex, sexual orientation, marriage and civil partnership, and pregnancy and maternity. So throughout your lives, whether in the training centre or going on into work, be thinking about these type of characteristics and whether or not you think whether you are being discriminated against because of any of these, or if you think a colleague or another person within your group is feeling discriminated because of any of these, then be aware of it, and like your safeguard and prevent, see, think and act. As I mentioned, majority of training providers will have their own websites that you can report things anonymously if you're not confident enough to approach your tutor or the safeguarding officer. But if you do see something, we all have a responsibility to act on it. Lesson rules. Now, when you're filling in your workbooks that you've received from your training centre, right, be considerate of punctuation, spelling, grammar and plagiarism. Right. When you think about punctuation, start with your capital letters and end them in a full stop. Your spelling, use a spell check, use a dictionary. If you're using Microsoft products or online word processing, majority of them will have like a blue line underneath or a red line underneath that will show you there's an error. If it's a blue line, sometimes it's punctuation or grammar error, or if it's red, sometimes it's a spelling mistake that you need to correct. So sometimes just as simple as highlighting what's underlined, and sometimes it'll give you a selection, a choice of how to correct it. So that's the punctuation, spelling and grammar. Always thinking about when you're thinking about the grammar, read back what you've written, because sometimes if you're anything like myself, sometimes your brain works quicker than your writing, and when you read something back, you might have missed words out here, there, or you might have missed out punctuation. So always have a good read back of what you've written to make sure it makes sense, or you might need to add a little bit here and there. And plagiarism is very, very important, especially when we're doing these online resources. Be considerate when you're doing your write-ups. A lot of people will see these resources, so your tutor might not recognize it, because you might be the only person within your training center that has come to this resource, so you might think it's okay, right? So your tutor might not notice that it's been copied word for word. But when you hand your books in and your tutor's checked it over, he said everything's okay, it goes on to someone external to the organisation. Now, someone external to the organisation will have come across many other persons or individuals' workbooks, and they start seeing that there's a similarity between what you've written and they've written. They're going to start thinking, hold on a minute, these people are copying off each other. How are they copying off each other if you've got one person one end? So they will eventually come to the resources within these websites or within what you're looking at now. What will happen then is that the external person, the external quality assurer, they will then say to the training provider, hold on a minute, he's been copied, he hasn't done the work properly. So what will happen is they will take back your certificate, and they will do that. If they see anything untoward, they will take back your certificate. So when you see these resources, just make sure that you write things in your own words. Do a bit of research if you're not sure. When you're doing your answers, make sure when you read the question and it says explain or describe, you need to make sure it's got good content within your answer, not just one word sentences, or one line sentences or one words. It says explain or describe, so it wants a good paragraph within your answer. If you just do one sentence, it's not good enough. It's not going to cover what you need to cover. So just be aware of that. And also within your workbooks as well, sometimes some of your questions might have double meanings. So it might say identify and then explain, or state and describe. So just be wary of that. You might need to say, Sailor Goods Act, and then it might want you to explain or describe what it is that you mean. So just be wary of that. So within this first unit, we're going to cover The aims is to develop an understanding of the different types of customers, develop an understanding of the nature of customers' expectations, and learners will explore the importance of customer loyalty, understand the methods used to attract new customers and retain the loyalty, and the objectives will be to understand the role and function of customer service in an organisation, understand the different types of customers within the organisation, and understand the value of customer loyalty to an organisation, understand how legal and ethical requirements relate to customer service as well. So with further ado, we're going to move on to Unit 1, which is all about your customer service principles and understanding the role and functions of customer service in an organisation. So we're going to start with the purpose of customer service. Why does customer service exist? Why does it exist to you? You've got to think, why? What's the purpose of it to you? What does it do? What does it help you with? So the purpose of customer service is to ensure that the customer needs, wants and expectations are met by the organisation. Now, it's also to give you a good customer service experience as well, because without customer service you'd be lost. You'd be walking around your store and you won't have a clue where anything is, and you have nobody to ask. So the importance of customer service is to give you a good customer service experience. It's also to provide good quality products and services that meet your needs. Products and services available when they say they have them. Making sure that if they have something on offer, making sure that it's there. The purpose of customer service is to make sure that it's fully stocked. Provide an efficient and polite service before, during, and after the transaction. I know we all haven't had the greatest experience in some organisations, but in other organisations they do take customer service very seriously, and the staff always have to be polite before, during, and even the after sales experience as well. That sometimes you might get a phone call from some organisations, you might think it's spam or you might keep ghosting them, but it's just a service that they're providing because you bought something. Sometimes it can be annoying, but sometimes they're just trying to make sure that you're happy with the products that you serve, that you've received. Treat customers with respect and consideration. You'd expect that when you go into any organisation and you deal with any feedback, complaints and problems effectively. So most organisations, their customer service policy for the likes of complaints and problems will have to follow a procedure, so it's step by step. Find out what the issues are, investigate it, let the customer know, and see what other ways to help the customer out to turn that complaint into a positive. So that's things when we're looking at the purpose of customer service. Why does it exist? So the scope of customer service. The meaning of the word scope is the extent of the area or subject matter that something deals with or in which it's relevant. So what the organisation will offer in terms of customer service and the limitations. Making sure you're meeting and exceeding the customer needs and the wants. Now this can happen pre-sale, during the transaction, post-sale, deliver on promises offered, or dealing with efficiently with customer complaints. So if we think about the scope, and when we want something delivered from a certain store, we would expect to be delivered within the time window that it is that you signed up for. The limitations of that could be an organisation might be fully stocked, so they can't provide that service for you within that time scale, but they find one that's closest to you, and then you decide whether or not that's good for you. So that is the scope of customer service. Sometimes it's within the limitations, and we use the delivery windows as the best way. And the best example of how to explain that is that if the time windows or delivery times are fully stocked, then we can't deliver within that time. So there's the limitation. So you'd have to go on to the next day or the next week, whatever it was, especially at the moment with us coming out of the COVID and the lockdown where we struggled to get delivery times. So that is the scope of customer service, one prime example of that. So we're moving on now to the values of a service offer. So the service offer is a pricing and range of products or services relating to the organisation. So if you look at some different types of organisations, they all have their specific types of offers that they provide. 2 for 1, 3 for 2, buy one get one free. These are all service offers, and they include value added benefits, service level agreements. So service level agreements can be, again, it could be making sure that something is delivered within a certain time scale. If you buy something, you want to make sure it's completed within the time scale that's written down in your agreement. There is a lot more to SLAs, so you best research in that. What an organisation will do to meet and exceed customer needs. So that is another service offer, and sometimes an organisation can negotiate a price with you, or if you want something delivered within a certain time, they can negotiate that time with you, or they might be able to use another. If you want one product, you might benefit from another product. The value of a service offer is the products or services that differ from the competitors. So as we're saying with the price and range of products and services, it is what one organisation does that's different from another. You might find in the likes of big superstores or supermarkets that the products and services differ, or they will differ from competitors. You might want to go to one store because the food tastes nicer from one than another, or the price is different from one or another. That is service offers. When you're talking about service offers, they generate customer loyalty and retention. As mentioned, sometimes people will only go to certain branded or certain supermarkets because they like the food or they like the offers that are on there. The service offer does set the standard of excellent customer service, especially when you get the supermarkets that say buy one get one free, buy 3 for the 2. You'd expect the service to be there. If you want to buy something, you'd expect it to be there, and you expect to receive excellent customer service. And then we move on to USPs and USOs, which we'll talk about in the next slide as well. So these are all values of service offers. So USP and USO, what do they stand for and what do they mean? So the USP is unique selling point, and the USO is the unique service offer. So you might find these sometimes in abbreviations when what's the USP and what's the USO. So the USP, the definition of it is to make a product appear better than its competitors, such as a digital alarm clock which has a docking station for an MP3. So that is the unique selling point. It's what makes the product better than it is, or better than its competitors. Then you've got the USO, which is the service. To make a service appear better than its competitors, such as a UK call centre that's open 24/7 and it's open 365 days a year to deal with customer queries. That is the unique service offer to that organisation. So we'll just move a little bit into branding and what branding's all about, and why branding is very important. So we're thinking of the USPs or the USOs for the following companies. So we're going to start with the Aston Martin. So what is, Aston Martin? Who are they? What are they about? Have you heard of them before? What comes to mind when we think of Aston Martin? So thinking about the USP, which is a unique selling point, and again I've put the definition of it, which is the features, what makes it better than its competitors. Think about Aston Martin. you must know what it is. If you don't, hope you researched it. And then you look at the service offer. You know, what are the benefits of an Aston Martin? So we look at the Aston Martin car. You know, the features. It's an expensive looking car. It's a well branded name. What do we think about when we think about Aston Martins? What springs to mind? Right, I've just mentioned about the expensive. It's a beautiful car. You know, a brand that you can believe in. But what else springs to mind when we think about Aston Martin? It's the car that we know that's in the James Bond movies. Right? So the strength of a brand comes across into different types of media. So this is another feature and another way it beats its competitors. So the benefits is we know it's a brand that you can trust in. We know it's expensive, but we also know that if we buy a car from them, it must be a trusted car. We must be able to trust in the engine. If it, hopefully it won't break down because it's an expensive car. If it does, we know that we can phone up the Aston Martin call centre and they should be able to help us out. These are all benefits of Aston Martin. So let's look at another one, Coca-Cola. We know the Coca-Cola comes in different sizes. We can buy bottles, cans. It also comes in different flavours. What are the benefits? The benefits, we choose the Diet Coke or the zero sugar. We know that it's probably going to be healthier for us. If we choose the normal Coke, it's going to be nice. It's going to taste nice. We can get different sizes, but we can get different sizes in all of them. So these are the USPs and USOs of Coca-Cola. But the strength of a brand, when I explain to you in a second what the strength of a brand means, is that look at the colours of Coca-Cola. And we think back to Father Christmas or Santa Claus. What colour suit did he wear before Coca-Cola come out? Yeah, it wasn't red, it was green before Coca-Cola, Father Christmas or Santa Claus's suit used to be green. Now this is the power of a brand, is that that figure changed his colour to fall in line with Coca-Cola, or with the colours of it, I should say, red and white. That's the strength, how strong a brand can be. So the other three companies, which we're not going to go through, but I want you to think about: Apple, Microsoft and Xbox, and maybe you can add that to your workbook as supplementary evidence, because your tutor will enjoy that. And think about the USPs and USOs for them type of organisations as well. So the brand and the brand promise. Branding is a way a product or service is recognised and the promise made by the organisation to its customer. When the customer sees a particular brand, they trust it, assists them when making a buying decision, as they know what to expect. If they don't recognise the brand, they will have no clear expectations of the product or service, and they will almost be taking a risk on any usage or purchase. So looking at that, we can usually look at ourselves as individuals and think about how we look at brands. Where are we more likely to go for a branded product more than a non-branded product, or one that we're not aware of? So you go to the supermarket and you look at some of the products. Let's look at what we've just talked about with the Coca-Cola cans, right? You would more likely to buy a more branded item like a Coca-Cola can more than a non-branded like Lidl or Aldi's own brand of milk, brand of Coke, unless you've already tasted it. So don't forget, a lot of our thoughts about branding is misinterpreted. Sometimes it's what we're used to, and that is the fundamentals of branding. It's what's been drilled into us over the years. So it's very important for the organisation to work on building the brand, to make it more recognisable, and that with this recognition, customers will know what to expect. So that's why brands are so protective of their logos, their pictures, because you hear a lot in the news about intellectual property, which we'll talk about later. How much organisations will do to protect them brands. Because once it's built, which does take a time and a lot of money, the organisation works very hard to maintain the brand and sure nothing undermines it or weakens it. So if you've got one brand and then another person comes along and tries to nick their intellectual property, then that could weaken the brand. So because the brand is so protective and they don't want that to happen, that's when they start sending notes. Because you look at the likes of online providers now, a lot of them are starting to you'll see a lot of reviews that a lot of people are getting their items taken down because of breach of intellectual property. So let's look at some of these brands and what our expectations of them are. So the first one, what is it? Yep, we know it's Google Chrome. So what's the expectation? Think about the expectation it is for you. Google Chrome, what's the expectation that you expect it to be like? It boasts that it's faster. It's a faster search engine than others. Is it? Is it to you? Okay. What about the next one? Sky. What's the expectation to that to you? Do they have lots of movies? Is their broadband fast? Is it reliable? A lot of different areas have trouble with Sky, some don't. What about you? What's your expectation of Sky here? Then we've got Harrods. We know Harrods. Our interpretation, expectation that it's very expensive. Are the products expensive? Yeah. Are the products reliable? Then we've got Skype. What's our interpretation of Skype? What's our expectations of it? Since the lockdown, what's our expectations of it? Then the next one, Seat. What is Seat? Do we know what Seat is? Of course, it's a car dealer. It's a car and a car dealership. What's our expectations of this brand? Are they expensive cars? Are they reliable? Are they good-looking cars? This is to you as the individual. Think about it. And then we got about the last one, which we all know, McDonald's. What's our expectations of McDonald's? Are you thinking fast? Of course, it's, fast food is supposed to be fast. It's always fast though. Is the food hot? Do we get what we pay for? Is it expensive? And when the lockdown was over, our expectation of the brand is, we knew that people were queuing up down the road for a McDonald's to go to the drive-thrus? Our expectations then, were we expecting to be more expensive? Then let's look at the extension of the brand, and let's look at all the logos, because as well as a picture of a brand, the logo is also very important, and the slogans along with them. So this little exercise is about identifying a brand from its slogan. So let's look at the first one. Connect you with people around the world. What organisation has that slogan? If you said Facebook, you'd be right. So that is their logo, their slogan relating to Facebook. Obviously, I know Facebook's logo is different now. Do you know what the logo is? Let's look at yours to discover. What organisation is that? What branding is that? Do you know? Of course, it's Twitter. What about the next one? Impossible is nothing. Do we know what organisation that belongs to? What brand it is? Adidas. Now you should know, you should know buy it, sell it, love it. What brand is that? eBay. Of course it is. We all know what that one is. We see it enough on the TV, because that's another way an organisation promotes its brand, through advertising. What about the next one? Work hard, have fun, make history. Amazon. When we think about Amazon, or again, let's go back into our expectations of Amazon as a brand, is that we can order everything online with that one. But we also have a negative way of thinking about the brand, about how much it affects its staff, how much it pays its staff, how long they have them working. Right? But however, if you look at the arrow, you have everything from A to Z. So that's what the arrow is for, because they have, within Amazon, they have everything you need from A to Z. What about Betray Your Thirst? Do we know what that one is? Sprite. That is the brand for Betray Your Thirst. So these are the importance of what brand, why brands are important. So these are what is a brand. You know, it's about the slogan, it's about the look, it's about the quality, it's about the expectations of the products and the brands. So when we look about branding and how it affects customer service offers, because we're talking about the customer service offers and what to expect, is that the brand reflects the organisation. If people see the brand, they feel they've got a certain level of service to expect, whether it be positive or negative. As we've said, with the likes of Amazon or McDonald's and other organisations like them, is that we have an expectation of them, and we all have our individual way of looking at it, whether or not, yes, McDonald's is fast, yes, the food is sometimes cold, or we don't get what we want, or Amazon is that, yeah, we know that it does have all the products that we want, and yes, we know that sometimes the staff are worked to the bone. So these are our expectations, whether positive or negative. If the organisation's brand is seen as promoting a good level of customer service, then the organisation works very hard at maintaining this. Or sometimes an organisation, a brand, will use the likes of fundraising and charities to promote the brands as well. Because if you look at some organisations, they're very good at promoting charities or giving money to charities or fundraising. So that's another way an organisation affects its customer service offer, the way it looks to everybody else. When the organisation thinks about a brand, it also looks at the whole experience for the customer as well. So that includes the logo, the uniform. If you go into a store, you expect the staff to be wearing the same uniform, or if you have a management team within the organisation, you expect them to be wearing a different colour shirt or blouse than everybody else that sets them out. So you know that if you need help and assistance from a manager or a supervisor, that you can tell the difference of who to go to. Or if you need help on a certain section within a supermarket or a store, then you know who to go to then if you just want to speak to a colleague. When you think about brand, and you also look at a website as well, and the way the staff answer the phone. So it'll be like good morning or good afternoon. How can I help you? Along with the organisation's name or the person you're speaking to's name as well. Also, when it comes into branding and how it affects the customer service offer, is how it deals with complaints. So if you go to an organisation, you would expect a complaint to be dealt with. Every organisation that you go to, you'd expect a complaint to be dealt with efficiently, and within a timely scale. And you wouldn't expect to go from one member of staff to another, telling them your complaint over and over again. You expect that to be translated from one member of staff. If it needs to go through a certain number of members of staff, you expect the member of staff to do that for you instead of you having to explain it. Different organisations, different expectations from different brands and different organisations will be different from you as an individual and the organisation that you go to as well. So these are things that you have to be aware of as well. So the importance of delivering consistent high customer service. So first of all, is what do we think? What is high quality customer service? So high quality customer service is what the customer expectations are, you as an individual, what you expect high quality customer service to be. Making sure the staff are training and the performance as well. So, but why is all this important? Because it will promote customer loyalty. Now, if you receive good customer service, high quality customer service, then you'll tend to go back to that store, right? If you don't receive good customer service, you will not go back to the store, and you're more likely to tell other people or your friends and family that you haven't received good service. Because don't forget, there's a very strong ratio of dealing with good and bad customer service. If you receive good customer service, you'll tell 4 of your friends. If you receive bad customer service, you're more likely to tell 15 of your friends, who will then tell 15 of their friends, and so on. So reputation from one customer is very, very important to a brand, to an organisation. Also, delivering high customer service reduces the amount of complaints, because if you go into a store and you receive a very, very good customer service experience, you're not going to be needing to put any complaints in, because you've got your service the way you want it, within a high level and a speedy. Positive reputation. We all know organisations out there, which ones that we want to go to and which ones we don't want to go to. So this is why it's important to deliver high quality customer service. Because as is going back to the customer loyalty, and the amount of people that you tell if you receive bad customer service will be, sometimes you might not even go into the store. You might just hear it from the word of mouth that the organisation's not great with customer service, so you don't even bother going in there. Can you think of any organisations that you know of where you've had that experience, where you've heard somebody say that they haven't had a good experience, and then you really think, I'm not going to go there because I've heard that it's not great, even though you haven't experienced it yourself. So this is all coming down why it's important to deliver high quality customer service, because it's all about positive reputation. And obviously brand and corporate image. We've talked about branding and the corporate image, which is the way an organisation wants to be seen, down to the uniform and the way a member of staff treats its customers, whether it be over the phone or when they come into the store. Future, and it's also important for future revenue and profitability, because it goes without saying, if you are delivering a high quality customer service, then you're going to get customers coming over the threshold, and increasing the amount of money that they spend. Because don't forget, it's all about increasing that customer spend as well. So customers come in and they feel more reliable to want to buy, because they received the high quality customer service. Because if they didn't, you wouldn't get the people coming through the door. So think about, we've covered about the high quality customer service, and I've covered a little bit about negativity as well. So what if high quality service is not delivered? What would happen? Okay, so we don't need you to, that's just something for you to think about, and also to make a note of it in your workbook as well. Now, keeping up to date with competitors. How do you keep up to date with competitors? How do you think you would keep up to date with them? Okay, so you keep up to date with them through magazines, seeing what offers they've got on, seeing what products, new products or services they've got. You know, you keep an eye on the social media pages. You know, everyone's got a social media page nowadays. So you keep up to date, see what they've got going on, what new promotions they're coming up. And also how to keep up to date with competitors through customer surveys as well. So these are all things to think about. But why is it important to keep up to date with competitors? Because it's all about future income and growth. Because you've got to be very competitive when it comes to customer service and selling. You've got to make sure that the products that you've got are better than theirs, or the promotions you've got are better than theirs, and also helps with your products and service improvements. Because if you are doing research into another organisation and you think of the products and services that you're supplying, or that organisation is supplying, is inferior to theirs, then by doing your research and checking on competitors, you then are able to put in place improvements to improve your own services and products as well. So it makes you think, yeah, my products or services aren't as good as that, so what we need to do is make sure we are better than that. So it gives you a chance. And we've got to think about, we will talk about SWOT analysis in other units, but we do think when it comes to this type of element about competitors and how to keep up, we've got to think about a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And we do strengths and weaknesses, which are all coming into internal structures, about internal to the organisation. They've got threats and opportunities, which can be coming, external. So we've got to think of things like that. So this is why it's important to keep up to date with competitors as well. So, features of effective follow-up services. So what does that mean? What is a follow-up service? So a follow-up service is all about communications and what you do once you've bought that product or once you've bought that services, and how the customers are doing. So obviously communications can be verbal, non-verbal, written, and when it could be emails, social media, over the phone. Offer upselling of associated products. It's always a big one as well. Is you always want to sell a product that enhances the product they've already bought, to prolong that product. It increases the expectations for the customer, because if they're able to buy an associated product that improves the product that they've bought, that generates a positive attitude as well. So then we've got customers' feedback. The features of a follow-up service is customer feedback. How did they feel it went? Did they enjoy the experience? What didn't they enjoy about it? And what could make it better? And then you have the after sales, going back to a bit what I was talking about earlier on, about sometimes you'll receive phone calls after you've bought something. Sometimes you might feel like the spam, sometimes it might annoy you, but sometimes it's about the organisation making sure that you're all right. Because you've got to think about, sometimes people will buy a product and something might go wrong with that product and they don't feel confident enough to take it back to the store or to ring up. So sometimes doing that after sales phone call might give that customer the chance that they wouldn't normally get. So if they the organisation was to phone up and say, hello, Mr. Scully, how have you been getting on with the product that you bought? And then it's your chance to say, well, it broke after a few days. Oh, I'm sorry. And that gives the organisation a chance to repair that damage, to improve the brand again and create that customer experience. Procedures for problem solving and complaints. Again, that could always to do with the after sales features as well, is to make sure that if there is any problems, that these are procedures in place to improve that problem and correct it if it needs to be corrected, or gives the chance for the customer to be refunded, or that product to be fixed. What makes it effective is making sure that if you do promise something when relating to complaints and queries, make sure that your response times are fast and within the time scale that you say to the customer. You get back in touch with them. Obviously, there's nothing worse than you saying you're going to be getting back in touch with the customer as soon as you found something out, and then days later the customer's having to ring you back again, or again the customer might not be confident enough to do that, and you'll lose that customer, because that customer will then go and tell other people that I've received a bad service. Effective follow-up is also to resolve post-sale problems. Mentioned that before, is that sometimes it's a chance for the customer to put any concerns or any problems to the organisation, and confirm customer satisfaction and implement solutions. Goes without saying, if you phone up the customer and the customer said there's a problem, then it's how you react to that and how you can fix that problem for the customer. And it's also to give the customers a chance to ask any questions that they've got as well. If they've bought a product or a service and they're not 100% sure that they're doing something correct or they're using it correctly, then it's you doing that follow-up service might give them a chance to be able to say, well, I'm struggling a bit with this, or I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. Then you or the individual, that organisation, can then put them right, or send them extra instructions if they needed it. When we think about customers and the types and needs, we have loyal, discount, impulse, need-based, and wandering customers. Now, loyal these are customers that will always come to your organisation, always go. Like, you must have your own supermarkets or stores that you'd go to, so you could be a loyal customer to that organisation. That you will be the bulk of their sales. Discount is customers. These are customers that will only tend to buy when there's a discount on, such as 2 for 1, 3 for 2, or buy one get one free. They only look around for them type of promotional products or services. Then you've got impulse, where you tend to buy on a whim. Oh, I like that, I love that. Or sometimes they can be difficult to sell to, as I've noted in there. But these were more likely to be people who are spare of the moment. I'll have that, this and that. Needs based, they only buy when they need something, or they only go out if they need something specific. They won't buy something expecting it to happen. They just buy it when they need it. And then you have the wandering window shoppers, and they're often visit to confirm offers or compare with competitors as well. So these are the different types of customers. Okay, so when we look at customers, there is two different types. We have internal customers and we have external customers. So you think, wait a minute, how can we have internal customers? I don't understand. Right, so internal customers, they are usually people that you're working with, your colleagues, your managers, or people of other branches. These are all internal customers. Because if you've ever worked for a big organisation, sometimes they do sell products from one branch to another. Because each branch will have its own profit and loss accounts. So the money will go, the products costs will go from one branch to another if you ever need to go and get products. If you're running low of something, then you need to go to another branch to get them products to bring them to your store. And they can be classed as internal customers as well. Sometimes suppliers can also be internal customers, depending on what the supplier is supplying to you. So that is what internal customers are, people who are within your organisation. External customers are the likes of you and me, traditional customers, who usually buy or use the goods and services that are not employed by or directly associated with the organisation. So external customers, they can take products or services and pay for them. They exist outside the confines of the organisation. They're open to approach from competitors, and they may always be dependent upon you or us for products and services, and may switch away to our competitors as well. So moving on now to cultural factors and how they affect a customer's expectations. Sometimes cultural experience has a direct impact on customers' expectations. So cultural impact factors can be something that's portrayed in the media, something that we look back at the likes of the Amazon. We know that people are worked to the bone, and some people will take that as, well, I'm not going to buy from them because I don't like that idea. Or we look at some closed stores where we hear about certain stores or certain organisations paying people slave labour costs to make the clothes. These are all things that are portrayed in the media. Language can also be a cultural factor and a barrier as well, because sometimes we might not understand what the person is saying. And I'm not always talking about a foreign language either. Sometimes it can be an issue with accents. One area of the UK or any part in the world, they might be speaking English, but we can't understand them because the slang or the accent is different, such as mine and yours. I have family around around the UK, sometimes it's very hard to understand what they're saying, and vice versa as well. So these are also factors that affects customers' expectations. Cultural backgrounds. These are also factor that affect a customer's expectations, such as social attitudes and behaviours, the way we expect to be treated. Sometimes a formality of greeting could be something that we expect, especially at the moment with the COVID. We can't shake hands like we used to. It's all this elbow business, formality of greeting. Different nationalities, different religions might do things a certain way, and they would expect things to be done a certain way. Sometimes people with cultural backgrounds will only shop in areas that's comfortable to them, who know that what the expectations are to them. So when we're thinking about customer expectations, we're also thinking about the service delivery, how we expect it to be. What we expect from the products or services that we receive. Now that could be the likes of how it's sourced, how certain products are sourced. Or we look at some products, are they animal tested? These are also expectations as well. Are they tested on animals? Are the products that we've bought been made by people who are paid well, not just slave labourers? Awareness of cultural differences, how the difference of people, how people expect to be treated. So we're thinking about service delivery. It includes responsiveness, reliability, the speed of the service that we're receiving. Are they professionalism? Professional. Are we receiving a personalised service? The attitude and behaviour of the people that are working within the organisation. The products as I mentioned before, are they ethically produced and sourced, kind to the environment? Some people don't like to buy from a supermarket because they buy things in bulk and it's affecting the stores that are local to them. So they only buy from locally sourced branches or organisations. And then we've got the awareness of cultural differences. The customers tend to match their expectations to their own cultural practices and experiences, which is why I said earlier, sometimes they only go to branches or stores that they are comfortable with going into. Now, moving on to the characteristics of challenging customers. We all know what challenging customers are, but what are the characteristics? What do I mean by characteristics? Well, we've got customers who are showing inappropriate behaviour, impolite, shouting, raising their voice. Usually you find this when they haven't got what they want, or they're making a complaint and it's not going their way. These are all characteristics that, along with angry. Some customers are quite angry or impatient if they want to make a complaint, or they're waiting for you to come back and checking whether or not you've got the product in stock. That is also a characteristic of a challenging customer. Frustrated, argumentative. A customer who can be distressed can also be a characteristic of a challenging customer. And the body language. Body language is a very big characteristic, because you can usually see whether or not a customer is open to what you're telling them. We have open and closed body language, crossed arms, angry facial expressions, hand-arm movements. These are all types of body language that can be a characteristic of a challenging customer. Even a challenging customer can be somebody with a disability as well. It's how we deal with them customers that will improve their expectations. So the challenging customers can be people with communication difficulties, they can't speak, and they don't speak English, or they have a very strong accent. Challenging customer is negative interactions. Sometimes you do get a situation where it's not going their way, and that brings along the characteristics of inappropriate behaviour and angry, argumentative, because things aren't going their way. It could be as simple as you not being able, or the organisation not being able to deliver something within a time scale that suits them because they're already fully booked. But it's how you, as a customer service advisor or a retail advisor, or any sort of customer service orientated work, is how you can deal with that customer experience of being able to turn that negative into a positive. So it would be like if the customer's being argumentative, it's how you're going to turn that around by saying, we can't deliver something within a certain time scale. However, we can keep a note, we can keep your number in case somebody cancels, or we can deliver it the very next day within the time scale that you want, or when you can. Think about when dealing with any sort of challenging customer, never ever offer them something that you're not sure of, because that makes things a lot worse. So make sure you offer something only within your area of authority as well. Another challenging customer can be someone who doesn't know what they want, someone who's undecisive or unsure. That is a very big challenging customer, because they might know what type of thing they want, but they can't be sure what the brand they want or how it works, or that type of thing. So now we're moving on to how the achievement of the customer service offer affects customer loyalty. So achieving the customer service offer, so how do we do that? So we do that through gauging customer satisfaction, and this can be through positive feedback and making sure that we meet and exceed the customer's expectations. Positive communication, make sure the customer's happy, they've received what they want. Personalising the customer service, so making sure we use a certain amount of questioning techniques. We have many different types of questioning techniques. We use that exactive listening, we use that open and closed questioning, funnel questioning. This is how we personalise a customer service experience. So if a customer was to come in and want to buy a washing machine, we need to ask whether or not it's for themselves. A series of questions. Is it for themselves? Is it for a family? How many is in your family? How often do you use the washing machine? That will dictate what type of size of washing machine that you need to give them. And then obviously comes down to making sure that when it can be delivered. You might not have a product in stock, so it will take longer for it to be delivered. But you can only know this by using a series of questioning techniques. Compliance with regulations and legislation. We must all do that, and we'll talk about that a bit later on with the likes of the Sale of Goods Act, Trade Subscriptions Act, and Consumer Protection Act. And then consistency of service quality. So if a customer comes in one day, they'd expect the service to be the same as they come in if they came in the next day, or the week after that, or the week after that. They want the consistency of high quality customer service all the time, and that is how you achieve the customer service offer. And making sure that everything is available and all the promotions are on, and that also affects customer loyalty as well, because we know some organisations out there who we will go to at certain times of the year, and you might not be able to have the products that they've got on offer, and that does affect customer loyalty as well. So customer loyalty can be positive customer relationships, customer confidence in the brand because you've met and achieved the customer service offer. They can trust in the service offer because they know that they've used the product before, the quality of it's the same, or the service. Commitment to the organisation. As I was said earlier on, you have different types of customers. And then you also have loyalty from customer recommendations, as I mentioned before as well. If you receive, if the customer service offer is achieved, then that customer has received a good customer service experience, so they're more tending to tell other friends or other family members, as opposed to if they didn't receive the good service, that is. So this is how the achievement of the customer service offer affects customer loyalty. What about the relationship between customer satisfaction and organisational performance? So this one, when you think about it, can be quite self-explanatory. So you've got customer satisfaction. So what we now know what customer satisfaction is, that we make sure that the needs and expectations of the customers have been met. They're happy. Delivering the products or services on time and according to the organisation procedures. So if you've created a time window or a delivery for the item or service to be provided, it's delivered on time, and everything that you've done has been made sure it is delivered on time, and then making sure that you go the extra mile. So sometimes you might find that you might not have a certain product in, or the service can't be provided within the certain time scale, so you make sure with the customer that you can go the extra mile. You might be able to find an alternative product for the same price, or you might be able to say, okay, I will keep an eye out for any cancellations and make sure that if there is one, we let you know, and then the service, we can make sure that it's delivered. So thinking about all these customer satisfaction, if all they're achieved, what would happen to organisational performance if everyone is happy? How does organisational performance react? The customer will come back. You get repeat customer. Customer can increase the customer spend because they have more confidence in the brand and in you or the member of staff. Organisation does bring in customer loyalty, and then achieve and exceed and agreed performance targets, which includes sales and service level agreements as well. So that's how customer satisfaction affects organisational performance. Because if you're delivering high quality customer service, the organisation will get repeat customers, will have a loyal customer following, and they'll increase their customer spend, and they'll achieve and exceed your targets for that week, month, or day, or whatever it is, and keeps you in a job then, and keeps the organisation going, and keeps everybody else in a job as well. So now we're moving on to brand reputation and how the image of an organisation affects customer perceptions of products or services. So let's look at Tesco's, let's look at Asda, and look at Sainsbury's. What do we think about when we look at these brands? Do you look at any of them and think one's cheaper than the other? What about if you look at any of them and you think the food tastes nicer out of these supermarkets? Or how about, I've ordered from all these, home delivery, and certain one I wouldn't use them again, or I would use them again because the service has been really good, or I wouldn't use them because the service has been really bad. So this is all about brand reputation. So when we think of these brands, some we might think is expensive, some we might think is cheaper than others. Some we think good value for money, some we think are associated with charities. We think brands you can trust in. Some have got nice food. Some we have a cheaper tasting type of food. Some have a good customer service when we walk in there. Some we know have got bad customer service. Good selection of products, and everything under one roof. So these are things that we can think of when we think about these brands. Now, how about these two brands, Aldi and Lidl? What do we think about when we think about them? Because when these first come on the market, we thought like they were cheap. There were places that we wouldn't go into. Even now, some people won't go into these brands. But if you think about the Nettos, if you ever think back to the Netto, right? There's a brand that you wouldn't, there's a supermarket that you wouldn't go into because if you've seen going into it, you feel embarrassed. Things have changed. We've come on a long way. The likes of the Aldi and Lidl, although you'd still walk in there and you'd see a totally different type of setup than you would with the likes of the Asda's, Tesco's, and Sainsbury's, where in them stores all their products are nicely all laid up on the shelves, all the nice facing, you can see all the products, whereas you go into Aldi and Lidl, they're all just left on the pallets or underneath the aisles, and you just have posters at the top. Totally different type of experience, but still about brand reputation. A lot of people will go and look at Aldi and Lidl, and some of the products that they're in there, they know that sometimes they might taste or the better value for money than in the main supermarkets. So we all have our own idea about brand reputation. So that's what we've got to think about when we're walking into when we're looking at this specific question. So we've looked at Asda, we looked at Sainsbury's, we looked at Tesco's, and then we're looking at Aldi and the Lidl, and then we look at the what we think about them at the bottom. Do we think these are cheaper? Do we think they're expensive? But do we also think they're good value for money? Have they got cheap tasting food, or is it nice food? Right? This is all coming down to our brand reputation of the different expectations of each of these brands and what we expect from each of them. So when we think about reputation and image of these products, we've got to think about the brand, how professional they are. Are they trustworthy? Are they competent, reliable, and competitive? How they affect our customers' expectations, our perceptions of these organisations, as I've just explained there. Now, do they alter our expectations? Do they increase or reduce the amount, depending on whether a reputation or image is positive or negative? As I mentioned before with the Aldi and the Lidl, when they first come onto the scene, we wouldn't dream of going to these type of places. Now, we're starting to shift over more than using our main supermarkets. We're using the Aldi and the Lidls more and more. We know which products to go for and which ones not to go for. Well, our demands are changing. Sometimes they are, the changes can be realistic, or sometimes they're unrealistic. The values, the organisational values, the standard of the products or services that are provided in each. We're looking at the quality, we're looking at the price. Do they usually come as a team? Can we buy some products cheaper than others, and the cheaper products be better than the more expensive ones? Of course we know this. You know, we look at the TV shows. We know when we buy a product, sometimes when they hide the brands, we don't know which is the better tasting one or not. And sometimes the non-branded stuff can be tasting better than what we've, because it all comes back to what we've been brought up with. We've been brought up with brand this and brand that, because that's the importance of branding. But trying to break away from that in the future. You know, we've got to look about legal compliance and market leaders of these organisations. Are they legal compliance? Do they, you know, do you get what you pay for? The size of the organisation. We know some organisations aren't as big as others. So what about consequences of dissatisfied customers? And what do we mean by customer dissatisfaction and the consequences? So customer dissatisfaction could be queues, especially at the moment. Obviously, we've had to queue up outside, keeping our 2 metre distance. It's been quite annoying, but we know that it needed to be done. We know we have to wear masks, and sometimes we're dissatisfied because we see people without masks. You know, we also think about quality. You know, is the quality as good as we expect it to be? Look at the likes of the McDonald's. Sometimes you might go into their stores and the food might not be as hot as you'd expect it to be. The opening hours. How many times have you got to somewhere that says closing time at 5 o'clock, and you know it's about 5 minutes before 5 and they're already shut? Or if you know, especially with this the lockdown and the COVID, and some of the post offices and the sorting offices, their opening hours are different. You know, we get there, we expect it to be open, but it's not because of the changes. Another one could be stock being moved around. You know, how many times you've been into a supermarket and something's not where you expected it to be because they've had a big move, store change. Prices and damages. If you've received something through, you bought something online and it's arrived damaged, you're not happy. Sometimes it's quite difficult to try to go through the rigmarole of exchanging things. Sometimes another customer's dissatisfaction could be when stock is not available. Maybe at high level, you know, at Christmas time or at the start of the lockdown when you went to the stores and people had already bought up loads of things such as the flour and the eggs and the detergents, hand sanitizers. Sometimes customer satisfaction can be the cleanliness of the place that you've gone into. You know, it's not up to the standard you expect it to be. Mis-selling of products is another customer dissatisfaction as well. You buy something that it says that it's supposed to be, you get it home and it's not what you expected it to be. Another one could be rude staff. We've all come across that. Is that sometimes you go into the store and the staff hasn't been helpful whatsoever, or they've been rude or abrupt with you. Overcharging is another customer dissatisfaction, where a product's supposed to be on sale and it hasn't been. You got to the counter and it's been full price, but you haven't realised that until you've got home. So you have to either put up with it, be dissatisfied, and then, or go back and take the product back. Some people might, some people don't bother. But they all have the potential consequences either way. The potential consequences to that one is that you're annoyed because you have to take the item back, or you're annoyed because you've got it home and it's not what you haven't been. You paid more than what you expected to pay for it. What that includes is loss of reputation, because you're going to tell your friends you've been overcharged for stuff, or you know you've been somewhere and the item's not been available, or there's been a nasty member of staff working there. It does reduce the turnover which leads to loss of profits, because if you continue to go somewhere and you keep getting satisfied, you're not going to go there again. You're going to find somewhere else to shop. Audits and reviews. If it's a service orientated organisation, and it keeps getting customers who are dissatisfied, then there is going to be an audit on that organisation and a review on the services that it provides. Such as if you're looking at a training provider, if targets aren't being met or the qualifications or the quality of the qualifications aren't being met, then organisations, the funding organisations such as Ofsted, SFA or anyone like that, they will come in and audit and review the training provider that they're working with. Potential consequences could be a restructuring of the organisation. If some people aren't performing well in one area, they could be either moved to another section or dismissed, and then that position might need to be filled by somebody else. Loss of members, reducing funding, and changes to the legal requirements could be a potential consequence as well, because the legal requirements are changing all the time, which we will go through a bit later on. So now, just take a little bit of a breather. So move on to section 4 now, which is the legislation. These are laws, a range of laws which have an impact on the customer service process, and these are designed to protect the customer. So in addition, legal legislation exists to ensure employers meet their legal obligations and that employees are protected and also follow company rules and regulations. So the first question on this section 4 is sales and consumer legislation and regulations and the impact that it has on customer service delivery. So what type of sales and consumer legislation regulations that you can think of? So we've got the Sale of Goods Act 1979, we've got the Supply of Goods and Service Act of 1982, and we've got the Consumer Contracts Regulations 2014, the Trade Descriptions Act 1968, and Consumer Protection Act 1987, and the Consumer Credit Act 1974. Now obviously I'm not going to go way into these, but it'd be a good idea for you to make a note of these and research them, because there's a couple of these acts that have now changed, and they're all being some of them have been replaced by a brand new act called the Consumer Rights Act. So you need to find out which ones have been changed. Although, if anything was bought between the 1st of August 2015, then it would be still coming under as these acts. So you've got the likes of the Sales of Goods Act, where when you buy something, you expect it to be fit for purpose. You expect it to be what it's been bought for, and if it's not, then you have a right for an exchange or a refund. The Supply of Goods and Services Act, if you were to buy something and something happens, then you have the right to ask for an exchange or a refund. So if you were to, let's look at the services. If you were to hire somebody to fix your bathroom or your kitchen, then you expect that service to be of a high quality, or your expectations would be, because you'd be discussing that with the the work person before the work commenced, so they know what your expectations are. And if that expectation is not met, then you have the right under this Supply of Goods and Service Act, or underneath the Consumer Rights Act, then you have a right to report them and try and get your money back, or get an exchange, or get it repaired, or whatever the circumstances may be. And then we've got the likes of the Trade Descriptions Act, where if you were to buy a product, that you'd expect it to be exactly what it says on the tin. If it's not, then you have the right to prosecute the organisation where you bought it from. So that's why the Trade Descriptions Act and now the Consumer Rights Act have been brought in. Because even though the Trade Descriptions Act doesn't necessarily come under the Consumer Rights Act, it does precede it. Okay, so the Trade Descriptions is still in action, but the Consumer Rights Act does precede it. So that's what that. So if you ever think, you hear about people saying, you know, they see something and the subscription says it's so much, and they, you know, the organisation has to sell it for that much. Well, within reason they do, but depending on the circumstances, they don't. So there's a fine line between the two that not many people are aware of. So you just got to be careful of that when you're doing, you know, if you're making a complaint underneath the Trade Descriptions Act. But there is circumstances where that doesn't exist. Whereas if you see a price tag on something, and you expect, well, hold on a minute, this is supposed to be £100. Why is it only a tenner? I'm going to get that for a tenner now. Well, that's not always going to be the case, because sometimes the organisation will say, well, wait a minute, we've only just changed that 5 minutes ago. The price tags are just in the middle of getting updated. So that is the difference between on Trade Descriptions Act. It all depends if it's deliberate or not. So there's the difference that you've got to be considerate of. You don't always get a product. Just because you see something at a certain price doesn't mean that you should get it for that price, depending on the circumstances of it. Sometimes you will get it, because obviously it could be a deliberate mistake, or it could be something that just hasn't changed over yet. So, you know, you just got to be careful of that as well. So the impact on customer service is making sure that the customer knows their legal and statutory rights have not been affected. The organisation's legal and statutory responsibilities to make sure all these consumer registration regulations are all met. And the products or service compliance with regulations and the legislation. Clear policies and procedures in order to remain compliant. And the staff training on procedures and policies as well. So all staff will make sure that they're trained on how to deal with any of these, and that including dealing with complaints and refunds, and making sure products are clearly labelled and described accurately. So my advice on them would be, there's lots of research on this that you need to go and look online yourselves, familiarise yourself with them. You don't have to read through the whole lot, because there is a lot, but get the fundamentals of what these acts are. And the newest, obviously, the one that precedes all these is the Consumer Rights Act. So just be wary of that and just do a little bit of research on that. And obviously, remember, when you do your research, make sure you keep it, because that goes into your workbook as supplementary evidence. Never ever waste any work that you've done. If it's relating to the workbook, make sure you keep it, because it shows the amount of research that you're doing and the amount of distance learning that you've done. Because don't forget, as I said earlier at the beginning, distance learning is very hard to prove, which is why I've said make sure that you make a note of how long you've been on this. And always, maybe leave a note in the section underneath here. So when we're looking at the Trade Descriptions Act, the Consumer Credit Act, Sale of Goods Act, Consumer Protection Act, and the Sale of Goods Act, right? The Trade Descriptions Act means that we must not make false claims or descriptions. The Consumer Protection Act, this allows customers to claim compensation for death, injury or damage. And the Consumer Credit Act protects customers when they borrow credit. Got the Sale of Goods Act. This relates to goods sold of merchantable quality. They must be of the quality that you expect it to be, fit for purpose. Consumer protection. This allows customers to claim compensation for death, injury, or damage. And the Supply of Goods and Services Act. This act covers a professional duty of care. So, moving on to health, safety, environmental legislation and how that affects customer service. So, health and safety legislation is Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. COSH, RIDOR, Manual Handling Environmental Protection Act 1990. The Waste Regulations 2014 and the Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment Regulations. You don't have to use these. You could always research your own legislation relating to health and safety, but think about, what does COSH stand for? What does RIDOR stand for? What does it mean by Health and Safety at Work Act 1974? Another unit that I will be covering for health and safety will explain a bit more about these legislations. But Health and Safety at Work Act is making sure that it is everybody's responsibility for health and safety, not just the employers, but not just yours either. COSH. Do you know what COSH stands for, and why does it exist? Yeah, COSH stands for Control of Substances Hazardous to Health. And usually this comes to when we're looking at chemicals and the type of chemicals, and that we only use certain chemicals in certain organisations. And each of them, we are on a COSH form. We usually know what to use and where to use it. So obviously we wouldn't use bleach on a worktop within a restaurant or a kitchen. We wouldn't use certain detergents on a floor that could cause people to have asthma attacks or anything like that. So these are all reasons why COSH exists, and the chemicals relating to that, where you'd have to research what chemicals are used in different organisations, and that will come under COSH. And then we've got RIDOR. What does RIDOR stand for? Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrences Regulations. So this is all why we must fill in. Organisations must have a way of reporting any incidents or accidents. So that's why we have an incident report book, or you will have an incident report book, both in the place of where you're working or in the training provider centre that you're working in. Again, later on in the units, we will be talking about different types of accidents and incident reports and how to fill them in as well, and what information is needed when you fill them in. Then we've got manual handling and the correct way to lift things. Do you know the correct way to lift things? Do you know what type of equipment is available for you when you lift things? Of course, we all know bend your knees and keep your back straight. But what else comes involved in that? Again, we will talk a lot more about this in future units as well. Is making sure that you have you make sure that the place where you're going to carry something is free from any anything in the way, or making sure that wherever you're going to put something down is free from anything in the way as well. Or if you're using equipment, make sure it's safe to use. Then we've got the waste and the waste electrical and electronic equipment. Okay, so remember when we're looking at equipment as well, is that your organisation that you're working in, any equipment must be PAT tested. Do you know what PAT testing is? Look into that one. Okay, so usually you'll identify that usually with a green, usually it's like a little green sticker that's on the end, on the plug or on the wire, but mostly on the plug with the date of when it was last tested or when it's going to be retested or how long it's good for. So these are all things that you can look into. Now the effects that these have on customer service delivery is it's for the safety of customers and the staff that all these legislation exists. Again, as I mentioned, health and safety of workers is everybody's responsibility, not just the employers. If you see a box in the middle of an aisle, don't leave it for someone else, or don't think it's not your job. You know, move it out the way if it's causing a hazard. Make sure that the chemicals are only labelled in the correct bottles. Only use the codes that are on the bottles for the surfaces that you're cleaning. Customers' legal rights. If anyone has an incident, then they have a legal right to make a complaint. So if you haven't followed these procedures, you could be, don't forget, it's not just the employer that can be held accountable. The employee can be held accountable as well. Organisation for legal responsibilities for the safety of products and services. So the organisational legal responsibilities is also to make sure that you receive the correct training for what you're, for the purpose that you're, the position that you're in. You know, if you are required to do certain things, then you must be suitably trained to use them. So never use anything that you're not qualified to use. Even if you're asked to use some machinery, right? If you're not qualified to use it, don't use it. Because if you injure yourself or you injure somebody else, then you can be held accountable because you have a responsibility to say, but I'm not qualified to use that. And then the products or services must meet regulations and legislation. That comes under that will come under the PAT testing. And I'll let you know now, that's portable appliance tests. Make sure that that product or that machinery has passed the minimum. Don't forget, it's minimum inspection for to be able to be used. But as I said, minimum. So it's like an MOT where when you get your car tested one day, right, it's suitable for that. It's passed the test for that day. Doesn't mean it's going to be okay for the following day. So it's your responsibility to make sure everything is kept in that vehicle to make sure it's up to the standard that it's supposed to be. And that's the same with any sort of products or services or machinery or anything like that. Is making sure that it's kept up to date and safe to use. Now, when we're looking at ethical considerations that affect customer service, ethical considerations could be honesty, owning up to stuff, social awareness, pride in the organisation and reputation, fairness, make sure that the price is fair, the treatment of customers regardless of their nationality is fair. Equality and diversity, making sure that everyone is treated fairly regardless of again, nationality, age, gender. Remember the 9 characteristics under the Equality Act? Can you remember what they are? Charitable organisations. Ethical considerations would be, we all know different charities, different organisations provide funding for different areas. It's we would think, well, if you're happy with spending your money, customer service and money in one place that deals with helping children out, then you go to that one. And then you've got another one that helps out other charitable organisations that you might not be happy with, so you wouldn't go to them. So you only stick to the ones that you're happy with. And then another ethical consideration is whether or not the place that you're going to, the products or services are locally produced, and the suppliers. So it'll be like, again, it will be like whether or not it's got any environmental footprints, that it's not tested on animals, it's close to where you live, the products are produced locally to promote the area that you're living in. So, Equality Act and how this affects customer service. It's the Equality Act of 2010. Can you remember what the 9 characteristics are? Okay, the age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion and belief, sex and sexual orientation. Okay, so what type of effects do you think these have on customer service? So, special considerations and reasonable adjustments. So, if we think about the likes of disability, people with disability cannot be discriminated against coming into a store just because they've got a disability. So, it's what that store can do will dictate whether or not they're meeting the Equality Act of 2010. So, if someone was in a wheelchair, making sure that they've got, that wheelchair can fit into the store that they're going into. They've got easy way of working their way around the store. Or if somebody hasn't got the facility to talk, or they don't speak English, or it's having something as simple as a pen and paper handy for them to write things down. That could be the difference between making sure they're covered by the Equality Act or whether they're not. Making sure that the fair and equal service provision, making sure they've got the facilities available for dealing with people of different disabilities, making sure they're not discriminated underneath the age or any gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy, maternity, race, religion and belief, sex and sexual orientation. So nobody should be discriminated against, and the effects on customer service is making sure that all these are followed. And that approved codes of practices. Now moving on to the last bit now, which is all about data protection. So we know that the key principles to data protection is personal information must be fairly and lawfully processed. Person must be processed for limited purposes. Personal information must be adequate, relevant, and not excessive. Personal information must be accurate and up to date. Personal information must not be kept longer than necessary. And personal information must be processed in line with data subject rights. And personal information must be secure. And personal information must not be transferred to other countries without adequate protection. So what all these means is that relating to the individual, yourself could be, is that no one should be asking you for information they've got no right to ask for. So it'd be like your training provider or myself asking you for your bank details. We wouldn't do that. We've got no right to ask for that. If we did, then we're in breach of data protection. Unless there's a specific reason why, but you must be aware of that before you give that information to. When we're looking at your workbooks that you're filling out now, your training provider has a responsibility under the Data Protection Act whether or not that information, well, you have the right to whether or not that information is to be kept or given back to you. If the organisation has received that workbook from you or information that you've given them, then you have a choice of whether or not you receive that back when it gets completed or you want that workbook destroyed. That organisation, the training provider that you're working with, they must abide by GDPR. So if you do not want that workbook, then that training provider must destroy that workbook with your information and any information that you've given them as well. The information that you've given them must not be able to be seen by anybody else. Your private information, such as your enrollment forms or any information, private information, must be kept either on a shared drive locked that nobody else has a right to see, that you're not aware of, that nobody outside the organisation that you've signed that work with, or if it's hard copies, that making sure that that workbook is kept in a locked room or cabinet that no one else has an access to other than the people who you know or that you expect to know. So that all comes under the Data Protection Act. So be aware of that as well. If you have any concerns of that, make sure you report that to your training provider. If you have any worries that your information has been mistreated or passed to anyone that you're not aware of. So how legislation affects the use and storage of customer information. That effects on usage and storage of customer information. Data stored according to legislation, as I've just mentioned, behind lock and key. Sharing of information is restricted and controlled. So you have got the right to control what happens to the information that you've given them. And disclosure of information is that any information that you've given them is only to be disclosed to people that you know. And if it needs to be disclosed to anyone else, then that training provider or that people you've given that information to must first of all come to you to ask permission for that information to be passed to anybody else. That information must not be passed to anyone without your prior knowledge. And the biggest thing that a lot of people don't realise is that emails are also a very important part of GDPR. How many times have you received an email from a training provider or anyone else where it's been a bulk email and you can see everybody else's email address? Check on a few now, right? If you see everybody else's email address within your email, this organization could, and I mean could, be in breach of GDPR because information has been passed to everybody within that email that they've got no right to see, unless you already know the class of people that you're in. But if you have got no clue who some of them people are, and they can see your email address and you can see theirs, there could be a possibility that it could be in breach of GDPR. So be wary of that. Have a look, see what you think. When we're looking at data protection, the information that a customer can about a customer that can be held is your name, address, phone numbers, email address, ID. Could be your car registration details, health information, bank and finance details if there's a need for that. So sometimes, obviously, if you're applying for hire purchase, or you're doing stuff, you bought stuff on the drip, then obviously they need to know. That's when they need to know their bank details. But as usual, it's important that information is kept secure. Paper documents stored in locked cabinets, key holder access only. Electronic information stored on an encrypted system, which is password protected, and the information should be stored for as long as it is only needed. So if you're buying something and you're doing it over a certain period, once that period is ended and you've paid everything off, that organisation should not be keeping your details on file for any longer than necessary. So can a customer ask to see information that's been held on them? The answer question to that is yes, you can. You can do a subject access request form, which does cost. This places a legal responsibility on the company to disclose personal information held on you. Now we'll come to the end of this unit. So go back, obviously, whatever notes you've made or what you filled in, go and double check. Always remember to embed some of the British values within your workbook as well, because that's always a good sign to show understanding. And also put in the Equality Act and 9 characteristics, because when you embed stuff, it shows a good understanding. So if you're looking at the likes of refunds and exchanges or health and safety, then that all comes under the rule of law. It can also come under mutual respect, tolerance of those different faiths. Everybody has the right to make a complaint, regardless of who they are. Okay, so thanks very much for your time today. Hope it's been beneficial to you. We'll have other units on there for you to have a look through when you're ready. If you have enjoyed or it has been beneficial to you, then please make a note of it and let me know, because it's always good to have a bit of customer feedback. If there's anything that you needed to see or anything you wanted to know a bit more about, then please put it in the questions underneath as well. It's always good for me to know, and I can always add stuff to it. So thanks a lot for your time, and good luck with the rest of your course. Thank you.